Welcome to the Athlete's Compass Podcast, your North Star for mastering endurance training and holistic health. Join us each week as renowned sports scientist and founder of Athletica.ai, Paul Laursen, along with athlete, coach, and sports scientist Marjaana Rakai, and coach and cyclist Paul Warloski, guide you through the maze of often confusing training principles. Make sure your compass is ready. Class is now in session. Hello and welcome to the Athlete's Compass Podcast, where we navigate training, fitness, health for everyday athletes. Today is the third and last podcast where we are talking about high-intensity interval training.
Oh, Paul, it's not going to be the last. Come on, mate.
Okay, you're right. It's going to be the last of the series.
Yes.
So if you haven't listened to the first two, please go back, listen to them. Starting with the first one is the prof, Dr. Paul Laursen. He explains the science behind HIIT, and then last time we did more practical information about phenotypes and 30-30s and 4-2s, threshold workouts. But today we are getting into a question from our friend Sophie.
Sophie, who we assume is a triathlete based on her questions coming up, she asked a series of high-intensity interval training questions on Athletica Forum, which we thought would be good to end our HIIT series this time. Her question is, I know there's no right way to skin this cat. In your opinion, does it make sense to build interval lengths over the week, such as increasing the length from 2 to 4 minutes on the bike over the course of several weeks? Or does starting with the 4 minutes give the biggest bang for buck regarding time at VO2 max? Or is it better to start with 2 minutes, as I haven't done these intervals for a long time?
Yeah. Awesome. Great questions, Sophie. Hope your training is going well, girl. And you know there's no right way to skin the cat. And look, I think this one makes a lot of sense. I think it sounds like you're almost playing with your own intuition based on your mind is so interesting how your mind kind of knows what it can and can't do, or should and shouldn't do. And, I like the formula that you're kind of going about here, where you're starting with 2 minutes might be more manageable for you in terms of a progression, and say you're going to do, 6 by 2 minutes, right? And that might be a perfect little starting place. And then the next week might be, 6 by 3 minutes, and then 6 by 4 minutes, or whatever the case may be. It's really helpful when we get a plan like that. And there is no right or wrong way to sort of do these sorts of things, but those are great sort of strategies that we can kind of go about these things. I think Sophie is a little bit more of a diesel athlete compared to a twitchy athlete. So this is probably why she's playing around in her mind around progressing her longer intervals. Remember in the last podcast, we were kind of comparing a lot of short intervals versus long intervals. And I think Sophie is certainly the diesel case study here where she's pretty keen on doing long intervals for her context. So just to kick things off, that's a great way to go things. And the only other thing I would add now, Sophie, is to really start getting a handle on Athletica's workout reserve, because it can really help with knowing what you've been exposed to, right? It really looks at your exposure time on any of these intensity versus duration bandwidths. All right, it's reflecting on your power profile and what that is over the last 6 weeks. And that's in pace or that's in running, right? So just go to your charts. That's what Athletica sees. Remember, we have these now also. The great Phil Whitehurst on the Athletica forum is our Garmin app developer, and he has put this on for everyone to use in real time on their watches, on their Garmin head units, and you can actually see what your exposure is at in terms of that reserve. And you know that if you're starting to get down in towards zero, or going into negative reserves, well, you're in uncharted territories in terms of the external load that you're pushing, whether that's running speed or that is power on the bike. And when you start getting into those zeros or negatives, you need to start kind of thinking about easing up and giving some recovery to hit it again, or to call it a day at the end of that, if that's there. So we spoke about this in the last podcast, where that's really the answer to all of these questions often comes down to you as an individual. There's no right or wrong answer for any number of reps that you do, how long these reps you do, whether it's short or long. It often comes down to you and what you've been exposed to. Remember, we're always, the most important session is the next session, and we want to continue to build that up from one session to the next, so that we're progressively overloading the system, and we reach these new heights.
Talking about what we've been exposed to, let's talk about recovery, like the recovery intervals in between. Let's say 30-30s, you have 30 seconds of recovery. What's the ideal way of recovery?
Yeah, so that is a $1 million question. That is just, or it's, I don't know if it's $1 million question. It's a very important question, Marjaana, and we're talking about what is the most important part of a HIIT session? It's the work interval. It's the work rep. So how do you maximize your effort in the work rep? Do you do, active recovery so that you flush out the blood lactate? Or do you do almost nothing, or towards nothing at least, so that you don't take away any oxygen in that muscle cell itself that's going to be, really important for replenishing that which is in the myoglobin around the muscle, so that it can, use aerobic metabolism to make more energy for you. And the answer is, it's not about, we've learned now, it's not about flushing out lactate per se. It's about conserving oxygen and allowing that myoglobin to replete itself. And that means passive effort. That means doing nothing, towards nothing, right? Like just turning the legs over just effortlessly. And that is the best way to recover from either a short interval or a long interval. You want to do just about nothing. So Stephen Seiler, one of his key papers when he was looking at recovery, 2 minutes of walking. If you're a running athlete and you're about 2 minutes of walking, almost maximally recovers everything that you need between your efforts. That comes from the guru, Prof. Stephen Seiler. So, and then, with respect to short intervals, often, like say a 30-30, again, keeping it just dead easy. When I'm doing 30-30s on my bike, it's just like really, really just barely moving my legs over kind of thing, because I'm ready to really rip into the next 30-second effort. And I know that if I'm going to be doing active recovery on that, I'm taking oxygen away from my ability to replete the myoglobin and give me resource and reserve for the next effort. Speaking of reserve, you can actually see that right on your workout reserve. If you want to prove this for yourself, check out your workout reserve numbers and compare yourself to an active versus a passive recovery. You'll see that in the passive recovery phase, your workout reserve is shooting back up towards the roof. That's what you want.
God bless our old PE teachers. But they exposed us to something that I know everybody can relate to. And that's recovery. Hands over your head. Keep walking.
Per block.
Right?
What was the rationale there?
okay, I've heard this is something that annoys me so much. Kids track and field meet or baseball, whatever. Wherever I see this, I'm just on the sidelines. I've heard that when you put your arms around behind your head, it opens up your chest. But what it's doing, it's closing off your lungs. Part of your lungs is at the backside, right?
Yeah.
So it closes it off. Plus, you're working against gravity. Like your heart needs to pump harder to push that oxygen. Like if you listen to your body, and this is what I teach my kids, if you listen to your body, you want to put your hands on the knees and bend over, right?
They did a study on that.
Tell us.
What do you think they showed?
That hands on the knees were better for recovery.
Correct. That's what they showed. Perceived recovery was better with hands on knees. So again, it was totally contrary to tradition, and this is like just a huge issue. So we just tradition always rules, right? And this is why we can never take anything for granted, even the things that we're telling you here right now, whether it's HIIT science or it's Athletica. This is what we know now, but we better be darn ready to switch our views and open to switch our views if in fact the data or our intuition kind of changes, right? And we can't be fixed in these sorts of mindsets, because they don't serve us well to do that, right? Or we're always going to be doing this in active recovery for the rest of our lives, and that's not the way to be. So but it's rampant in sport, right? And it's ego. Martin, my colleague at HIIT Science, he speaks about this all the time. We see this in sports at the highest level. It's just like the coaches that make there, the athletes that make it there, egos, they have very, very powerful and strong egos because it's an important element that elicits high performance, but it doesn't always serve us well to make change. So it's such an interesting topic you bring up there, Marjaana.
This is kind of awkward to do on the bike too, I'm telling you. All right, Sophie next asks, how would you change interval duration and intensity for a more slow diesel kind of athlete like Sophie? Would you prescribe the shorter intervals for slower athletes to improve their MAP, maximal aerobic power, and longer intervals for more explosive athletes to build their aerobic power and reduce glycolytic action? So this is something we kind of talked about in the last episode, but she brought into some pieces that we should probably address with MAP and glycolytic actions. So what is MAP and how do shorter intervals improve it?
Yeah, well, again, we did mention this. So MAP is maximal aerobic power. So it's like your VO2 max power on the bike. Would be analogous to kind of your 4 or 5 minute power. And look, again, if we think about the study that we mentioned with Nikki Almquist and Bent Rolstad, that's on the HIIT Science website in a blog form. It's really easily digestible for all, and it is basically they showed that you get more bang for buck in a group of 13. I think it was 13 elite to highly trained cyclists. That was kind of the short intervals were still working for those athletes. Even they were a mixed group, probably be a blend of diesels and hybrid athletes. So like you just continue to progress, probably set numbers, right? So if you're doing like a 30-30, like you might start with 3 to 4 sets of these 8 30-30s, with 3 minutes rest in between, and then you would potentially add another set until you move up to 6 is probably getting to be enough. But remember, each time you do one of those sets, Sophie, you are you're probably trying to get like a slightly greater mean average power across those sets, right? So say you're doing them at 350, right? You might be working towards going 355 mean on the next one, and then 360, 370, etc., until you're almost towards 400 or whatever number it is for you, kind of thing, right? So as you add a set number and you add more power, this is why we want to have these sets open if possible, not fixed in erg mode. But if we have these open, then it's really we're allowing our brain to elicit that added power output if it can do it, or pull back if need be as well, and save it for another day. So yeah, that would be again, I think we spoke about this last time when Old was kind of asking the question around, and he was bringing in both his 30-30s and early in the week, and he was talking about his 4-minute efforts later in the week. Both were great for a cyclist, where he's kind of had both in there. So lots of ways. Just you need to be careful with a triathlete because you've got the other sports and whatnot are in there as well. So context always. You gotta, that's where if we're just talking about bike, then 30-30 might be nice. Just hit that kind of once. You don't need to also hit that with a 4-minute effort, because you might be getting that also already in your swim workout or in your running workout, right? So context always, never one right way to do these things. It's all about you, Sophie, or you, the listener. So what level are you at? And how can you leverage the tools at your disposal, like workout reserves, so you see individually where you're at with all these sorts of things, and then progress your level accordingly.
You mentioned erg mode. So you would recommend not using erg mode on your HIIT sessions?
I think erg mode is fantastic when you're starting out, and because you don't really, you're a little lost, in terms of what hitting the right intensity is. So erg mode, I think, is really good early on in the piece, because then you can just go through the motion, and it takes all the guesswork out. When we're talking about erg mode, we're like, basically you can plug in your Athletica workout into, whether it be Trainer Road or Zwift, or you name your platform, you plug it in there, and it just, that's the power that you kind of have to ride on the trainer type that you have. So that's fantastic. And then it's just like, again, there's no guesswork. That's the power I need to ride. That's the external workload, and it'll be what it'll be. And if I fail, then I fail. I can't do the last sort of sets. That's fine. But at least I'm learning. And so really good in the beginning, just to learn what that power and pace sort of feels. But then as you become a more experienced athlete, then it's a great idea to switch it up and go to open mode or free ride or whatever it might be called on your platform of choice. And now you're trusting in your mind, and you're learning in your mind. You're sort of trying to target this power. You might also do this in the open road if you have a power meter and you're keeping an eye on the power numbers. But you're just, maybe you might want to test going a little bit harder than what was prescribed. And or if you're really, again, if it's not so good, then maybe you're failing a bit, and we're down a little bit. So that's really good to play with. And then if we take the most experienced athlete, so now I'm reflecting on, high profile athletes like that I've coached, like Kyle and Andy, athletic ambassador. They're so well conditioned mentally and physically that they just dial directly into that power, and they can repeat it. They have the whole we talked about last time, the neuromuscular programming and stuff, right? So their mind is totally dialed in precisely to what actually has to be done there from the power output perspective. And their first repetition is exactly the same as their last repetition. And the only thing that really steps up might be the heart rate a little bit from the first to the end as it's there to meet it, and then they turn away and they call it at the end of the day. So that's what we're striving for at the end, but we don't get there right off the, that's not going to happen on day one. So there's a nice little, hopefully you can see a nice little progression there, Paul, from erg mode to really dialing in the neuromuscular, the mind to body output connection kind of thing that you would get towards the end as a seasoned athlete.
Awesome. To finish off Sophie's questions, let's talk about warm-up. In order to accumulate the most time at VO2 max, what would be a good warm-up? I thought I would do a progressive warm-up with a few strides and acceleration. I assume this is running. For example, 6 minutes easy, then 6 minutes at the first threshold, 3 minutes at the second threshold, and then 3 minutes easy. Then I would do the 30-30 workout. What is a good warm-up for HIIT sessions?
Yeah. I don't overthink this one. I think there's always lots of ways to sort of skin it. And I think you can even get away with making the first set of 30-30s as a little bit of your warm up too, right? So this is when I'm going to do 4 to 6 sets of these 30-30s. I don't care too much. I'm not going to overly stress myself if my first set of 30-30s isn't amazing. I'm sorry, but I'm just not. Well, at least that's the level I'm at, where I don't worry too much about that. If I'm 50 watts below what set 2, 3, 4, 5 is going to be at, because I'm getting this priming effect, this warm up effect, where and this there's something called the Q10 effect, where when the muscle cells actually warm, they actually start firing better. So you get this efficiency kind of thing happening, and that just takes time. So but I think like the way she's described that there, where it's you would definitely want to have something easy. I wouldn't probably go straight into 30-30s without at least warming up a little bit. I do a couple surges maybe too, and where it's like, and even if it's really, really short, like I might even just do 1 or 2 like 30-second reps, and with 2 minutes between them kind of thing. But at least I've engaged for 30 seconds and I've started to breathe a little bit harder, and then I'm kind of ready to go. So yeah, I wouldn't overthink the warm up too much, but it is good to be warm. And you'll especially need this too if you happen to be going through a little bit of a period of fatigue, be that kind of from work, stress, life, then it finds that it takes me a little bit longer to warm up as well for that. Marjaana's smiling. I'm sure she can relate.
Yeah, and as I age, I find like I need a little bit more warm up. 10 minutes is not enough anymore. I've added another 10. So 20-minute warm up easy is good. If I'm running, I like to have some strides in there. And also, I've been doing strength work first and then doing my bike HIIT session. That I love to do that. But I think as we age, and especially if we do it in running, it's good to have a long warm up and then hit those fast twitch muscles with some strides with plenty of recovery in between, and then use the first set as a warm up.
Yeah, and I'm also like I'm rereading the question again, Sophie. Sorry, I might have missed this a little bit, but you're really, I can see you're fixated on accumulating more time at VO2 max. Whether that's an important thing or not, we don't totally know. It may be an important factor, but the jury is sort of still out on that. And yeah, so but for sure, if you want to accumulate more time at VO2 max, then you're going to want to have some sort of a VO2 priming effect in there. And again, if I'm going to be really picky, I would say you might want to do. You've only mentioned 3 minutes at second threshold. You might want to do a little bit time over threshold. so that you speed the VO2 slow component, and then so that those larger fast twitch fibers are a little bit more primed and ready to go. And but again, these are small little things that I'm not sure if these are big rocks. I think you can skin this one a lot of different ways and probably come out the same outcome. The key thing is getting the workout done. If you can get in and get that workout done, but whether it's done with that first set perfect or not, right? That's the only thing that's really going to be potentially jeopardized is the very first set. If you do one set of 30-30s, you're primed for the second set, which is kind of where I sort of started. And whether I achieved that much time at VO2 max on my first set of 30-30s or not, I'm not sure if that's going to be what makes me the better athlete at the end of the day. What for me it's going to be more important on is consistent training day in and day out, hitting my sessions.
So, Paul, Marjaana, we had some final short questions about HIIT workouts in general. Are there any misconceptions about HIIT? I'm sure, Paul, you've heard a lot of them since you published your book that you frequently encounter. Can you debunk any myths surrounding effectiveness or safety?
The biggest one is it's not about pain, no gain. That's the biggest misconception. When someone says HIIT, they immediately, at least the average person, not the HIIT science follower or the Athletica follower, but anyone that's outside of this area or who doesn't follow Steven Seiler, then they'll be thinking that a HIIT workout is more like the CrossFit, and you'd better be flogged and dead at the end of it. And that was never what the coaches that were designing high intensity interval training for Olympians in the earlier 30s, 40s, and 50s. It's never what they had in mind. But and nothing against CrossFit. It's got its place. It's great, but it's like that kind of what is it, Orange Theory and these sorts of things. There's just this movement that you've got to kind of kill yourself. And that's just not really sustainable. That creates a stress that can be you've got to be careful with, right? Certainly can make you injured or run down. So I'll say that's my biggest one, Paul.
I would highlight importance of understanding RPE, like your rate of perceived effort, because it comes in so handy when you're learning to do interval work. And use RPE instead of focusing too much on your power and blindly go by, I need to do 30-30s between 300 and 320, which I used to do. I knew the target and I was trying to stay within there, and then along comes the prof and says, well, keep it open, like your target, but keep it open. Don't think about the upper limit, like you're limiting yourself if you're thinking this is where I'm gonna hit it today, because your body doesn't really know the numbers. Your body knows how hard this effort is feeling to you, and then you can work on your mental mindset. Okay, do I have one more, or do I have one, maybe two more? Okay, maybe it's time to say bye-bye to this heat set today. I feel like I'm getting close to being tanked. Or do I have more? And that's when you have more in your tank, when you're doing more reps, that's a sign. Or doing faster, for example, running. When you're doing them higher power or faster, that's a sign that your fitness has improved, regardless of your FTP number, or if it's 107% of your FTP. So don't get blinded by numbers. They are there to guide us, but learn to understand your RPE would be my recommendation.
What advice would you give to everyday athletes who are interested in starting or optimizing their HIIT training at the moment?
Well, I would say, first of all, just start. If you haven't yet, and then I think probably we've spoken about it a couple times on this podcast, where we've been talking about that progression as you go from erg mode to the high performance athlete, and really, ultimately, to Marjaana's point, in developing your feel, your rating perceived exertion. So I think those are really that's the key. So know that you're sort of on this journey, and start somewhere, and then start on erg mode, but always really start of trying to connect that mind and body to the workout itself. Use the tools like Workout Reserve to help guide you in terms of knowing how deep you're going into the well, and how does that Workout Reserve number align with how you feel, and because it can just kind of back up some of the feelings. That's why I love it. So it's like, oh yeah, that's about how I felt. That's kind of cool. That's nice. And then you almost don't even have to use those as much, and then you can just really trust in your feel, and at any given moment, be happy with where you're sort of at on those HIIT sessions.
Marjaana, what do you think? What advice would you give to a new person coming to see you as a coach?
I want to direct this to my female athlete and say that, yes, you need to do these. Or I hope that they will learn to love them, because they can be really fun, pushing yourself and then understanding like you can do hard stuff and you can run fast, and just enjoy, have fun. It doesn't have to be super serious.
Yeah, I think I would add two things. One is that, starting with a workout like a 30-30 is kind of a great gateway drug, because they're doable, they're manageable, yet they're really effective. And I would also advise people that, as Paul says a lot, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat. There is no one specific HIIT workout that is the end all and be all. There's a lot of different ones, and experiment, try them, see what works for you, and see what else you can do.
Yeah, and the only final thought I would add, Paul, and not to take away from any of the HIIT stuff that we've spoken about, but I kind of reflect back on my colleague Phil Maftone's advice, and let's make sure we're ready for HIIT to begin as well, right? Back to the beginning, like let's make sure that we're a healthy athlete first, because remember that HIIT comes with added stress, and you might, if you're not ready for it, then that's all good. You're not ready for it, so just start with basic movement and aerobic development first, and then, but when you get to that point, you're a healthy athlete, and then to kind of to Paul's point, no right or wrong way to skin it, but try ramping it up a little bit and see how that feels, and then build from there.
That is all for this week. Thank you for listening, and join us next week for the Athlete's Compass podcast. You can help us by asking your training questions in the comments, liking and sharing the podcast, giving us 5-star reviews, because after an episode like this, clearly we deserve them, engaging with us on our social media. And for Marjaana Rakai and Dr. Paul Laursen, I'm Paul Warloski, and this has been the Athlete's Compass podcast. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Athlete's Compass podcast, your guiding light through the complex world of training for your endurance sport. For a deeper dive into the science, listen to our companion podcast, the Training Science Podcast, and check out the AI adaptive training platform, Athletica.ai. Thanks.